So the 6th Democratic primary debate took place last night at Loyola Marymount University in Los Angeles, California. It was a much more winnowed down debate stage than we've seen in debates past. There were only 7 candidates up there as compared to like 10 or 12 that we saw before. And of those left, we had Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Pete Buttigieg, Andrew Yang, Amy Klobuchar, and Tom Steyer. I think you could make a case for every one of those candidates being up there except for Tom Steyer, who's at like 1 or 2% in the polls and basically just bought his way on there. Everyone got more speaking time as a result of there being fewer candidates, which is great. I thought that they got to go more in depth on the policy issues, which we the voters want to see. The candidates didn't just have to give their answers in sound bites. They could actually discuss, the policy matters, and we got to see who knew their stuff and who didn't know their stuff. So let's talk first about who were the biggest losers of the debate, and then later we can get into the biggest winners. So I thought the moderators were absolute losers in this debate. I don't think there's been a debate so far where the moderating crew did a good job. They tend to ask questions with this very right-wing framing, and last night was no exception, certainly when they were talking about the economy, when they were talking about Trump impeachment, when they were talking about free college education. They weren't doing any favors for themselves on those questions. But there were 2 moments that I thought stuck out as particularly bad. One was when Judy Woodruff confused Andrew Yang and Tom Steyer. I thought this was a very embarrassing moment.
Mr. Yang, what more?
I'm over here.
Mr. Yang, what more can you say
Judy.
to the American people?
Judy,
I'm sorry, Mr. Steyer. I'm sorry.
But even worse was when Amna Nawaz was calling out Bernie Sanders when there was a question asked about race relations, and Bernie wanted to talk about climate change because that was the topic that was discussed immediately before. And the moderator made it seem as though that Bernie was not willing to talk about the issue of race, and of course the crowd erupted. It seemed like it was just like a big moment for her rather than a moment for the presidential candidates. So I was not a big fan of that. And let's take a look. I thought Bernie did a good job at responding to it and sort of like diffusing the situation there because it could have been a bad moment for him. But I thought the moderator was totally wrong to step in here, especially when they don't seem to be so willing to interrupt other candidates.
Senator Sanders, I do want to put the same question to you, Senator Sanders. What message do you think?
I'll answer that question, but I wanted to get back to the issue of climate change for a moment because I do believe this is the existential issue.
Senator, with all respect, this question is about race. Can you answer the question as it was asked?
I certainly can. Because people of color, in fact, are going to be the people suffering most if we do not deal with climate change.
There was also a really dumb question about how this is the holiday season and can the candidates give a gift to the other candidates on the stage or ask forgiveness from the other candidates on the stage. It was just very silly. Mayor Pete, I also thought he was one of the biggest losers of last night's debate. He looked very rehearsed, especially with his in his exchange with Amy Klobuchar. I don't think he did all that well. He decided to use identity politics and brought up how he's gay and how he's a veteran at just like a very forced time. It didn't really sort of fit the conversation. You can argue that Pete had the better end of the exchange with Elizabeth Warren over campaign finance reform, not because he's right on the issue, but because Warren hasn't been the most consistent on it. But even so, like, I don't think Pete came across as very likable. He sort of came across as one of these empty suit type politicians, kind of like how Marco Rubio was in 2016. And the question is, like, will Pete have one of these malfunctioning moments like how Rubio had one? And we'll just have to wait and see. I don't think he malfunctioned in last night's debate, but I don't think he came across as very presidential or very likable at all. So I think he was one of the biggest losers. And then a tier above that for candidates who did it just a little bit better, I guess you got Tom Steyer. I mean, he was just sort of there. He didn't really make a huge impact, but he didn't mess up in any significant way. Amy Klobuchar, I mean, she got an incredible amount of speaking time. She came in second when it came to speaking time with about 20 minutes, which is remarkable because she's only at like 3% in the polls. She's at like 2 or 3% of the polls, and she's talking this much. But she also had a very silly moment during the debate when she asked Mayor Pete and Elizabeth Warren to stop arguing. This is the debate, Amy. I hate to break it to you, but you're supposed to be arguing at a debate. Let's check out that funny clip.
Senator Klobuchar had your hand up first.
I did not come here to listen to this argument. I came here to make a case for progress, and I have never even been to a wine cave.
Andrew Yang got very little speaking time once again, but I thought he did okay. He had some charming moments, also some awkward moments, which we've come to expect from him in these debates. The stage is quite big after all, but I thought his best moment was when he was talking about the value of human beings, not just as workers, but as people who have intrinsic value, and, you know, sort of wrapping that into the conversation about disabled people in the workforce. I thought he was very strong on that. And I certainly hope that he sticks around for a little while longer in these debates. I like having his voice up there. Then you had Elizabeth Warren. Wasn't her best night, I wouldn't say. She also didn't do anything that's going to hurt her tremendously either. She had that exchange with Pete Buttigieg, which sticks out, talking about the Wine Cave fundraiser. I don't know if she did better in that exchange than he did, really, but, you know, just bringing up that Wine Cave thing, I think, puts a visual in the voters' heads, and I think that was a good strategy, a good thing to bring up. She kept going back and back to that, like, 10,000 selfie thing, which got a little annoying at times. I think SNL will definitely cover that if they even have an episode coming out on Saturday, if they're even in season, I don't know. But that was like one of those weird refrains that we heard from Elizabeth Warren. I thought her best moment was when she talked about her age and how she would be the youngest woman elected president. Take a look at this clip.
Senator Warren, you would be the oldest president ever inaugurated. I'd like you to weigh in as well.
I'd also be the youngest woman ever inaugurated.
Yeah, when that sort of thing is done right, it just works, you know? Like, it either works or it doesn't work, and I think in this case it did work. Bringing up identity politics can often backfire, or it can just, like, not land as well as you think it's going to land, but I think in this case it was a good job. Joe Biden. I thought Joe Biden actually started off the debate very, very strong. Up until the halfway point, I actually thought he was winning the debate, and that's for two reasons. One, because he's the front runner, and as long as he just doesn't mess up terribly, he can sort of coast to victory, so there's not much expected of him. Also, you know, he's had a tough time in the earlier debates. He oftentimes loses his train of thought, or he gets his words mixed up, or he's just kind of like lost on stage, not realizing what's going on. We didn't see much of that in last night's debate, especially in the first half of it. And I thought he was much, much sharper, much more presidential. And he looked like the Joe Biden from 10 years ago, like a really strong performance, I thought, in the first half. I thought this was maybe his shining moment when Joe Biden was asked about if he'll seek a second term, because if he's elected president, when he runs again for re-election, assuming he does, he would be aged 82, and that would definitely be the oldest president that we've ever had. And I thought he gave a strong answer here.
Are you willing to commit tonight to running for a second term if you're elected next November?
No, I'm not willing to commit one way or another. Here's the deal. I'm not even elected one term yet, and let's see where we are. Let's see what happens. But it's a nice thought.
That's not to say that Joe Biden had a flawless night. I thought he was noticeably absent in the second half of the debate, and he started to trail off a little bit. He had this weird stuttering impersonation during the last question of the debate, which I thought was kind of weird. Take a look at this.
My wife and I have a call list of somewhere between 20 and 100 people that we call at least every week or every month to tell them I'm here. I give them my private phone number. They keep in touch with me. A little kid who says, I can't talk. What do I do? I have scores of these young women and men who I keep in contact with.
But overall, Joe Biden didn't have a bad night. I think this was maybe one of his better debate performances. He was overshadowed, though, and I think he was overshadowed by the person who won this debate, and that is Bernie Sanders. Now, full disclosure here, I am a Bernie Sanders supporter, but I like to think that if he had a bad night last night, I would be able to tell you that I could separate my political analysis from my fandom as a Bernie supporter. But I think that he genuinely did win this debate. He was on point. He was himself. He had some great viral moments. And he also got the most amount of speaking time, which counts for something. They spent a lot of time during last night's debate talking about campaign finance reform, and Bernie Sanders is strongest on that issue out of anyone else on that stage, including Elizabeth Warren. Bernie didn't get into too many scuffles during the debate, but he did have this awesome viral moment where he made mincemeat out of Joe Biden and Pete Buttigieg for taking money from billionaires. Let's take a look at that moment, because I think that was the highlight of the night.
Now, there's a real competition going on up here. My good friend Joe, and he is a good friend, he's received contributions from 44 billionaires. Pete, on the other hand, is trailing. Pete, you only got 39 billionaires contributing. So, Pete, we look forward to you. I know you're an energetic guy and a competitive guy to See if you can take on Joe on that issue. But what is not a laughing matter, my friends, this is why 3 people own more wealth than the bottom half.
So is this debate going to cause some major shift in the polls? No, I don't think so. I think Joe Biden did what he had to do to maintain frontrunner status. Maybe because Bernie had a good night, he'll continue on his trajectory of catching up on Biden a little bit, maybe uptick a few percentage points, but nothing crazy. I think that the top 2 will stay where they are. Mayor Pete, maybe he'll go down in the polls a little bit because he didn't come across all that well, I don't think. But overall, better debate. Having fewer candidates on the stage helps it be a better debate. And we're actually getting close to voting time now. Voting starts in February. There's one more debate before the Iowa caucus. And so far, 5 candidates have qualified. That includes Joe Biden, Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, Pete Buttigieg, and Amy Klobuchar somehow. But I'm eager to see where this race goes. And that's going to wrap things up. So Monday, we're going to have a new show. But there's not going to be a bonus show on Monday. Tuesday and Wednesday, we're sending out repeat shows for Christmas, so no new content there. And then Thursday and Friday of next week, we're going to have themed shows. And then we'll be back on Monday the 30th. So for those of you who celebrate Christmas, Merry Christmas. Happy New Year to everyone, too, which is also coming up soon, although we'll see you before the new year starts. And thanks, everyone, for tuning in. I'll see you soon.